the majority of the tanks actually break down. That they stall, that they run into mechanical problems, things simply break into the tank, and they stop.
Down one very steep incline, something happened to Archie's car. He reported that he was out of action and that I was to go on alone.
Of the original tank force, only 9 remain operational. With them is Lieutenant Arthur Arnold and his tank nicknamed Dracula.
The going was now simply one succession of shell craters. It was thrilling the way the tank would go down into a crater, stick her tracks into the opposite wall, and then steadily climb out.
So you're in a dimly lit compartment. You've then got the situation where it's bucking up and down. Unless you hold on to things, then actually you're going to fall over and things are moving in there.
Gunner Alfred Reifer is in a D-Company tank which crawls closer to the German trenches and spots serious trouble. A German observation balloon. It can quickly call in a deadly artillery attack and halt the advancing tanks and infantry. It must be destroyed immediately.
Percy Bolt excitedly told me he was going to fire at a German observation balloon. Several rounds are fired, and Bolt claimed a direct hit.
A handful of tanks breach no man's land and bear down on the German front line, where hundreds of defenders are shocked to see the approaching metal monsters.
In 1916, the Germans had basically no idea that the tank was in development. So they're sitting there and staring out, and then the first thing they realized was the sound. Because tanks are loud. These guys have no idea what's coming towards them. None of these guys had ever seen a machine like a tank. Most of them haven't seen a car. They started firing too, with machine guns and rifles.
The world's first tanks are now almost on top of the German lines and are about to face their biggest battlefield test.
By now, machine gun bullets are smashing against it. It's like being in a hailstorm in a tin box. And that noise is death.
September 15th, 1916. The first tank attack in history is underway. Here at the bloody Battle of the Somme, the British hope the new armored weapons will crush German defenses and help to end 2 years of trench warfare. Mechanical problems and rough terrain stop most of the tanks in their tracks. But some make it across no man's land and grind slowly forward into German fire.
And now, machine gun bullets are smashing against it. And that noise is death.
As we approached, they let fire at us with might and main. Then a smash against my flap caused the splinters to come in and the blood to pour down my face.
Dracula reached the line first. A row of German heads appeared above the parapet and looked in some amazement at what was approaching out of the murk of the bombardment.
In 1916, the Germans had basically no idea that the tank was in development. The first thing they realized was the sound, because tanks are loud.
One stared and stared and stared, as if one had lost the power of one's limbs. The big monsters approached us slowly, but always advancing. Someone shouted, "The devil is coming!"
They started firing too, with machine guns and rifles. Both didn't do any good.
Damn, this fire-spitting thing crosses over shell holes and is coming steadily and surely towards us.
The fear of being overrolled. It's a very deep fear. Everybody has been squashed in the ground. So the German soldiers developed something, it's called in German Panzerangst, that's tank fear.
Now a hail of machine gun bullets passes over us. Out, out, out! Monsters are coming.
We were advancing. The tank was on top of the trench, and there we paused. Whilst the Vickers guns raked the enemy to port and starboard. Then on we went again.
One of the remaining tanks approaches its final objective at the center of the German defensive line, the village of Fleur.
We came into the village, which was a heap of rubble with a few skeletons of houses still standing. There was hell outside, all right.
The village of Fleur has been liberated. A British spotter plane observes tank D-17 moving down the main street.
The scene in flares was without precedent. Firing as it went, the tank lurched up the main street, followed by parties of cheering infantry.
The news spreads quickly. Back home, the British, eager for any good news from the front, celebrate their new lethal weapon.
This is the high watermark in the Battle of Fleur, because it's on this spot that the tank D-17 turns round, stops, the infantry come up, and it becomes the point at which the battle ends. Is it a total success? Well, within 4 days, General Haig ordered 1,000 tanks. As far as he's concerned, it's definitely proved a point. Tanks have a role in modern warfare.
7 months later, in April of 1917, Haig sends his lethal armored weapons into action near Arras. His plan: exploit what is considered the weak point in the German line, attacking the small village of Monchy-le-Preux with a massive strike of artillery, infantry, and tanks. Dawn, April 11th, 1917. The attack is set to begin at 5 a.m., but it's snowing and bitterly cold. Allied commanders order a 2-hour delay, hoping the weather will clear. They notify the artillery and infantry, but nobody thinks to tell the tanks. And promptly at 5, 3 tanks move out, all alone. Without knowing it, these tanks are pioneering a new armored tactic, the surprise attack, unheralded by a warning artillery barrage. With them is driver Jack Harris.
It seemed odd to be advancing without the usual artillery barrage, but our orders were clear: to advance at 5 a.m. and capture Monchy.
Throughout the Great War, artillery is seen as being critical to prepare the way for the attack. It breaks up the enemy defences, it cuts the wire, it may kill a few Germans. But it also warns them of what's happening. At Monchy in 1917, when there is no warning barrage, then the Germans are caught by surprise because the tanks simply appear on their position.
We stared aghast as slowly a tank crept towards us, and we opened fire. We hoped a wide ditch at the side of the road would stop it.
But it doesn't, and now the tanks have Monchy-le-Preux at their mercy.
We just drove straight down the main street, while the crew fired at everything in sight.